Welcome to episode 49 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Mike Lahiff. Hey, Mike.
What's happening? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Now, did I say your surname correct?
Yes, you did. Yeah, everyone butchers it, so I'm like totally used to it. But it's cool when someone says it correctly.
That's cool. I thought it was Lahiff or something like that. So,
Everyone thinks
what
that's what it is. Yeah,
do they?
yeah. It's like the H is silent. Lay if it's a tough one.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to hear your journey through the military. As always, we have the four questions at the beginning of every episode. So if we have a bullet point answer for these, then we'll dive into your main episode. Sound all right?
Yeah, word. Let's do it.
Great stuff. Great stuff. But before we do jump in, I forgot to ask this. Whereabouts are you in this world? Because we are doing a remote recording, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
always like to know where you're from.
Philadelphia, birthplace of the United States.
Nice, nice. I was in Philly. When was I in Philly? Like a year and a half ago. Yeah, year and a half ago, and I went to the steps, the Philly
The
Rock
Rocky
Steps.
Steps. What'd
It
you
was
think of Philly?
really cool, really cool. Yeah, I like the look of it. Wish I stayed there longer. It was a 1 day stop off on a massive road trip.
Oh,
But I
okay.
might be back. I might be back.
Yeah. All right. Right on.
Great, great, great. All right, so let's dive in. Let's get those four questions out of the way. So they are: when did you join? What service and branch did you join? How long did you serve for? And what rank did you get to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined, dropped out of college and enlisted in August 2003. It was a really long process to get to that August 2003, but that's when I went to boot camp. I had a very lengthy police record, which was inhibiting me from getting enlisted. And then so I was in the Navy, aviation at first, but my goal was to get into the SEAL teams. Eventually met that goal. Did a little over 10 years of active duty, and I made it to E6, Petty Officer First Class, also known as a SO1, because my rating
Awesome.
was Special Operator.
Nice. Yeah, it'd be great to hear more about that because I don't know too much about the Navy, be that Royal Navy or US Navy. So yes, it'd be cool to hear about that. But let's rewind the clock. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Yep. Born and raised in Philadelphia. Well, just outside in the burbs, but yeah, this is where I was born and raised.
Nice, that's cool. And how was growing up for you in that area? Because I'm guessing it's always been pretty popular place.
It was my childhood was awesome. It was I grew up in a very Irish Italian Catholic neighborhood. Went to Catholic school. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but uh, it was great. Played sports. It was the type of neighborhood where like every day after school, kids would be out playing stickball or football or hockey in the street. Every chance we got, we'd go run off into the woods and play in the woods. And yeah, it was fun. It was awesome.
That does sound cool. And, was you into anything in particular? Like, was there a particular sport or an academic aspect that you were, like, pretty good at and enjoyed?
Yeah, academics. I was good in school, but I was a total underachiever. So it was like I was that kid that would like never pay attention, or I was goofing off in class and causing trouble. But it kind of time to take a test, I would do really well on it, and people would be
Okay.
like, what the hell?" And I'm like, I don't know. I guess I was like soaking some information up. Sports wise, yeah, I played everything when I was in like elementary school. Typically football, basketball, baseball, occasionally track. That was like in my later years, like middle school. And then in high school, I just stuck to lacrosse was in there too. And then in high school, wrestling. Um, but then in high school, it was just football and rugby.
Okay, okay. Rugby. You actually played rugby.
Yeah,
That's
that's really big around here. Yeah,
Oh, right. That's cool,
yeah.
that's cool.
All the high schools have it now and stuff. It's cool to see it grow.
Brilliant, brilliant. And we spoke about this, kind of before we recorded, but with your surname being as is, you mentioned it was Welsh, so you have that kind of background as well. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I'm your typical American mutt. So I got what's it third. So my parents grew up here, but and so did my parents' grandparents were the immigrants. Um, and it was, my dad was a split between Welsh and Irish, and then my mom was British and Irish. So
Okay. Yeah. That's cool.
I,
That's cool.
I did a DNA test actually not that long ago, like the whole 20, like ancestry or whatever. And some people in the family did it, and it was interesting to see some of the stuff that I had. Like I was like 1% Egyptian. I was like, I don't know where that came from.
Really?
Yeah, and then like another 1% like Finnish, Norwegian, one of those two.
Okay. Now you say that, so I did again said this to you before we recorded, but now I understand why you're like me. It's the color we are. Pale. But also maybe with those 2 percentages, that's why you got a really strong beard. Maybe that's why you got
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I just actually I just shaved it like a month ago. I'm trying to grow it back. It was getting pretty gnarly. I like having a beard. And then one day I was just like, I'm shaving this off, and I shaved it off. My kids, my wife were like, "You look weird." I was
Who's that?
like, "I grow it back." I was like, "All right, I'll grow it back."
That's good growth though for a month. But anyway, so after school, at that point, I mean, are you thinking you're gonna be joining the military? Did you have any kind of uh, like history through the family with military?
Yeah, so I grew up hunting, fishing, camping, all that. I was in Boy Scouts. Um, I mean, I killed my first deer when I was like 10 or 11 years old. I was young. And I loved it. I loved being in the woods. I loved camping and all that. Loved playing sports. I always had a thing for the military because I like when I was growing up, like grandparents, military. My aunt was in the military. She was in like Desert Storm, and her husband, my uncle, was there, and all that stuff really resonated to me. And they would always do these. The Air Force has, it's a Navy base, and Air Force used it, put on an air show every year, and everyone would go up and sit out in lawn chairs and drink beers and watch like the jets fly by. I absolutely loved it. And then when I was in, it was either fourth or fifth grade, I got punished. Couldn't watch TV. My mom was like, "Go read a book." She took me to the bookstore. This is when I still had like Barnes and Nobles. Like no one goes to bookstores anymore. And then went to the bookstore, and I found a book, and it was a guy painted in camouflage, like hiding in a jungle, and there was a big gold SEAL Trident on it. I had no idea what a Navy SEAL was at the time, and I just thought it looked cool as hell. And it was a book about Vietnam SEALs, frogs in Vietnam. I I I must have read that thing in like 2 days, cover to cover. Like I read it multiple, and then I started grabbing all these other SEAL books, like stuff with like Dick Marchenko and Rogue Warrior, and then the movie Navy SEALs came out with Charlie Sheen, and I was in like fourth grade. I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. Then, then you go through like high school, and then I went to college because that was like supposed to be the thing to do. It was like first in the family to go to college. My parents didn't go to college, and I was not a good college student. I was really there just for like the partying. Then 9/11 happened, and that seed that was planted when I was in like fourth, fifth grade, it was just like, it was just pulling me. I was like, I got to go. I have to do this. And so it took me a little while to enlist though, because I had a spotty history.
Okay, okay. So what does that look like? Was it a case of ringing a place up and saying, "Can I join up?" Or do you have recruiting days anywhere, or like how does it work over there?
So really, you just show up to like a recruiter's office, and they have them in like strip malls all over America. They're not. Uh, you just look it up, walk in a recruiter's office, and say, I want to join. I was I remember pretty vividly. So I had to take summer classes because I failed a bunch of other college classes. I needed to catch up on my credits. And I was literally falling asleep in the class, and a professor came over and like nudged me awake and was like, "Mr. Lahiff, whatever, pay attention to my class," and gave me like this whole scolding. And I was just sitting there. I was just like, I don't even remember what the class was about, but I was just like, I just got up, grabbed my stuff, and literally went to the recruiter station that afternoon. I was like, I want to join the Navy. I want to be a SEAL. And they were like, sweet, let's sign you. They're like car salesmen. They want to sign up as many people as they can.
Right.
And they promise you the world. But then I had a really hard time getting, I had to go get a bunch of waivers. I was arrested a bunch growing up, like through high school and even parts of college, but nothing like, I wasn't like stealing cars, or it was always like underage drinking, disorderly conduct, just being a fucking knucklehead, getting in fights, lots of fights. Um, and So I had to go get a bunch of waivers. I literally had to go around and see the judges that I had to go stand in front of, and there was quite a few of them. I think there was like 6 or 7, but I was only able to get in contact with like 4. I went to the courthouses, and the judge would sign me a little letter saying, "Yeah, I approved this young man going into the military to change his life, yada yada." And when I went to the recruiter, they took me down. They take you to the station called MEPS, and you have to go through all these like physical checks, health checks, uh, and then they put me in front of like the colonel or whoever it was, the captain that was in charge of the recruiting station. It was down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because that's where I was going to college outside by Pittsburgh. And they were like, "Dude, we can't get you in the Navy." I was like, "There has to be a way you get me. Like, how can I get into the Navy?" And the guy literally was like, "If you go and get a letter from every judge, maybe I'll get you a waiver." And he was just getting me out of his fucking office. Like, he was like,
Yeah.
this knucklehead's not going anywhere. I showed up like 3 months later. I was like, "Here's the letters from the," and he was like, "Wow, okay." And so I had to get some waivers, and I wanted to just go right into SEAL training. And at the time, they would give you, it was called a SEAL challenge contract, and you have to like pass a special test, like a physical screening test, and you can get the SEAL Challenge contract if you check some boxes. And I was fine with all that stuff, but since I had to get a waiver just to enlist in the regular Navy, they're like, "You're not getting the SEAL contract." They're like, "After boot camp, you have to go to the regular Navy." I'll
Right.
pause there because I could keep rolling, but that was my experience. It took me quite some time to get into the regular Navy.
Yeah. But that's impressive to get hold of judges, of all people
So I
to
would like hang out at the courthouse. I was like try calling, and like no one answers at the courthouse, or like
yeah.
some lady would answer and she'd be like, "What?" And so I just showed up, and I would just like talk to the secretary or whatever who was there. I was like, "Dude, I need some," and some of them were just like, I had the letters like pre-written, of course, because like no one wants to go write a letter for you and take time. So
Yeah.
like I was making it easy. I was like, "Just sign this for me," and
Yeah.
the lady would like look at it and she'd be like, "I'll be right back," and then like boom, sign it. Like
Ah,
none of
it's
the
still
judges like saw me face to face. They didn't give a shit.
oh, okay, okay, okay. It's still
Yeah.
impressive. Still good, so yeah, nice that you got there. So then you head off to you mentioned it being called boot camp. Do you call it boot camp for the for Navy basic training, is that right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah?
Or people, I call it boot. That's like what everyone calls it, but maybe the correct term is basic training. I don't recruit
Uh,
training. I don't know.
recruit training. So how long was that for you when you did start out there? Do you remember roughly?
Like how long boot camp was?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 8 to 9 weeks or something.
Oh, it's yeah. And how did you find that? Was it what you expected? Was it what you were, anticipating?
Um, I thought it was going to be a little more difficult. It
Okay.
wasn't difficult. It's just tedious. Like you're like fucking folding underwear perfectly every day, and like stupid stuff. Like the physical aspect of it, easy, easy. It was easy. It's just the pettiness of it. But I
Okay.
get it. Like I understand why they have to do it. They're trying to install the same discipline across the board. Like if you can't pay attention to details, like what can you pay attention to? And so,
Yeah,
but I couldn't wait to get out of there. Of course, like it's
yeah,
just like, oh my god, it sucks. But it's not like a physical suck. It's like
yeah.
a
But
mental
it
suck.
but did you think it was easy because you were already quite fit and quite strong yourself? Is that why? Like, I'm guessing there was, others there that found it difficult because they weren't.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. Not to be like, oh yeah, I was like Mr. Super. Like, um, yeah, there's
No,
some people obviously struggle with the physical, but I was like going into the Navy with the idea of like I'm trying out for
for the
the
SEALs,
SEAL
right?
teams. Yeah,
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 yeah.
I'm going to Bud Straight.
And it's weird that out of the 8 or 9 weeks, the first thing you remember is folding underwear. I mean, if you still do it now, then I'm guessing
No, I don't fold my underwear anymore. Well, I guess a little bit, but yeah, you're like ironing your. They call them skivvies. That was the first time I heard the word skivvies for underwear when I got there. There's a bunch of weird Navy terms. I was like, what? But I remember folding underwear. I was like, why the fuck am I? Or ironing it. I was like pressing it. I was
yeah,
like, why am I doing this?
wow.
Like what?
I remember we had to put our, I mean, army's a little bit different to the navy, but, we had to make our socks into these smiley faces. So when they opened the lockers, you had 3 single socks on top of
Oh
each
yeah.
other, smiling at the at the
Oh, that's
corporal.
great. That's funny. I
Yeah,
love hearing those stories too. There's like and some like drill instructors or whatever you want to call them. That they all have like their different things too that they'll fuck
Yeah.
with people.
Yeah. I think all of our stuff was like A4 size, so we'd have to have everything A4 size, um, putting a white piece of paper in front of it and then printing it out, like, things like that. It's just yeah, things they put you through, just like you say, tedious, just to maybe get rid of the people that actually don't have that mindset.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, you finished that. Are you still trying at this point to get into the SEALs team or what's kind of like pathway through there?
Yeah. So what you can do if you don't get a SEAL Challenge contract. So the people that do have a SEAL Challenge, it's different now. So this is going back to 2003. Now they put all the people that are going to direct the SEAL training. They put them in the same boot camp division, so they all stay in the same barracks together. Um, at least I think they do. When I went in, they didn't have that. It was you would just have like a couple people in each boot. You would have, I forget how many people there were, like 100 people in your division, and there might be like 2 or 3 people who are like, hey, I want to go to special operations, and that could be like EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. It could be diver, it could be SWIC, the special boat guys, and SEALs. And they would get up earlier in the morning than everyone else and go to the pool together and do extra physical training. And so, but you have to like that's if you're on a contract, you get to go. Now, if you want to, you can also, if you didn't get the contract and then you get the boot camp, you're like, oh, I want to go be a SEAL or whoever, you could volunteer to go to those things.
Okay.
And so I did that, and I was like volunteering to go to them. And I wasn't able to go to all of them like the other guys, and I forget why. It was just because I didn't have the contract. But eventually, they're just like, hey, if you think you want to be a SEAL, you got to go take or any of those jobs, you have to go take the physical screening test. And it's like a 500-yard swim. You get out of the pool, get dressed, max push-ups, max sit-ups, max pull-ups, and then you do a 1.5-mile run in boots and pants. And so I went and took the physical screening test. I passed it, and I was like, cool. That maybe they'll still give me orders to go from boot camp to BUD/S. And I met with the guy that we called him dive motivators, but it was the guy that was in charge of SEALs at boot camp. Former SEAL himself. And I never met a SEAL in my life until this point. So this was like the first SEAL I met. And I remember, and I had like the boot camp crud. My throat was like really swollen. I was sick. And I went there, and I was just like, I was pretty nervous. I remember being nervous because I was like, man, I don't want to fuck this up. Like, I want to get right to SEAL training. But he was just like, dude, sorry to burst your bubble. Like, because of your waivers to get in your police record, we can't let you go right to SEAL training. You have to go to the fleet and prove you're not a shitbag. And then he was like, just reapply as soon as you get to the fleet after. And I was like, all right, roger that. And so I took orders after boot camp to go somewhere else into Navy Aviation.
All right. So you had to head off to aviation training. Is that right? Is that like another bunch of
Yeah,
time?
I went to A school. So after boot camp, everyone goes through different training schools, and they called it A school. I don't even know what the A stands for. My A school was a PR school, Air Crew Survival Equipment Man. Work on like parachutes, like the ejection seats, parachutes. You learn how to sew. I learned how to sew when I was there. I was like, oh shit, I could use the sewing machine. Never did that before. I was like, never thought I would join the Navy to become a SEAL, and the first thing I'm doing is sewing, learning how to sew. I was like, man, this is a fucking rude awakening. It's that training was, I think it was like roughly 2 months, and I was in Pensacola, Florida, and it was whatever. It was easy. Went to there was nothing like super difficult about it, but right when I got out of boot camp, I was like, dude, I'm crushing everything I go after, and so like I was able to graduate top of my A school class, and they gave me like an advance. I came in as an E1. They gave me E3 out of boot camp because they gave me some award coming out of boot camp for being like top recruit. And all I did was like, I was like, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and do what I'm supposed to do when I was at boot camp. Like I probably said 10 words when I was at boot camp. Then, so they advanced me to E3. Then I got E4 right out of A school for graduating top in the class, which was cool. So then I got
So
orders.
just on that one, are they ranks that you're
Yeah.
talking about? Yeah,
Yeah.
because we actually just only call them what they are, but not in
Oh,
this.
yeah.
So
Okay.
what's E3 enlisted?
It was just an airman.
Okay,
E3 just stands for airman. And then E4 is third class petty officer.
right. Okay, okay.
And then so I showed up to my first command, which was in Jacksonville, Florida, um, with P3s, the aircraft P3s. It was their training squadron. So it was nice. It was shore duty, which is cool. That means I wasn't going to deploy.
Okay.
And I just worked at this training command. So it gave me a lot of time to focus on there's two things I was focusing on outside of just like my job was um, I started going back to college to keep chipping away at college. I was taking night classes, weekend classes, but then training. So they had a nice pool on base, a good training facility, and I just worked my ass off to go. And as soon as I had the opportunity, I told my command, I was like, hey, I'm going to put in for go to SEAL training. And I went and took the test again, passed it, and I got orders to buds. I think I was at that command for about 18 months before I was able to go to, and I finally got orders to buds. This is
Nice.
like 2004, end of 2004, going into 2005.
Okay. So how did you find those 18 months at that first location? Obviously, you said you're keeping your head down, you're doing those little bits and pieces, but did anything stand out for your time there?
Nah, it was fairly straightforward. I met some great people. Some people I'm still friends with from that command to this day. Um, the work itself wasn't difficult. I was just making sure like the air crews equipment, the survival equipment, emergency equipment that goes on the planes and that they wear on their kit was all good to go. Spent a lot of time behind a sewing machine, sewing Molly on the people's like gears, like the little straps and stuff. Um, and I just worked out. I
Okay.
thought of it almost like a prison sentence.
Did you?
I was like, this is my purgatory for being a shithead. So whatever.
And did in that time, did you ever waver off, or was you like, this is still the
Hmm.
goal. This is,
Hmm.
like you said, a prison sentence. I'm just gonna get out of get after it.
Yeah, that was it. I was just gonna get after it.
Sweet.
Also,
That's
during that time, I got married. Like got married. That stuff will come up. My wife at the time uh, became pregnant with our first child, like right when I was getting orders, right before I got orders to go to Buds.
okay.
So we had we had our first child like on my way to. I think when I showed up to Buds, my daughter was like probably like a month old. Drove across country with her in the car the whole night.
Wow. Wow. So, quite supportive, I guess, of you getting your end goal, I suppose. So did they follow you to Buds, or did they have to wait until you passed it? I guess I don't know how that works.
Yeah, followed me to Buds. It was exciting moving across country, driving across country. It was good. The support was good for what it could be. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's always hesitation, but it was good at the time.
Okay. And what rank are you when you put in for Buds and you get that ticket?
I made E5 actually, so second class petty officer right before I left. So I was showing up to Buds, year and a half in the Navy, um, and I made second class petty officer. It's funny,
Okay.
I moved like 5 ranks in my first 2 years in the Navy, and then I only went up one more rank the rest of the time in the Navy because all I wanted to do was like operate.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that later, but
Okay. So just to clarify for dumb idiots like me, and I'm not saying listeners are dumb, they've probably already got this, but just help me out. You've mentioned that you're an E something, so therefore I believe that to be an enlisted, but
yep,
within the title of that, it's got the word officer. So what's going on there?
it's a petty officer. That's what's
Right?
key. Petty. You're a
Oh,
petty officer.
okay,
So
okay. So it's like,
yeah,
I guess we've got warrant officers, so they're not actual officers, but you've got petty.
yeah.
Okay, okay, good, good to
Basically,
know.
I was a sergeant. E5 sergeant. It's equivalent to a sergeant.
All right, okay, that helps. Thank you.
Yep.
See, there we go. My
The
silly question.
E4. What's an E4? What's right before sergeant? Corporal. So I
Corporal,
was.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when I showed up to my first command, I was already a corporal, then a made sergeant, and I made it up to staff sergeant. I stayed at staff sergeant for the rest of my career.
There we go. That helps loads. Dumb people like me can't work out Navy ranks.
No
Um,
worries.
so you get to Buds. What's your mindset? What's your mindset when you're driving across the country? You're like, fuck yeah, I've got it at last. Like,
Oh yeah, man.
what's going on in your head?
God, I was working on it for at that point like 4 years. I mean, this is something I was thinking about since I was a kid, and
Mm,
then I was like, holy shit! And then I showed up to the command and like finally seeing like the grinder and the quarter deck and the obstacle course there, all that, and seeing like the classes running around when I showed up, I was like, it was a whole mixed bag of emotions. It was like, one, I have my new family. I have a new baby. I just drove cross country. We're getting settled into our place out in town, even though like I didn't really stay there. You stay on base most of the time. You get the weekends to go back. I was excited, nervous, all that.
Yeah, yeah. And when you go there, I'm guessing, and this is where you might want to share a bit of Bud's information, what you can. Um, I'm guessing everybody's rank gets stripped, and you're all going in a base level.
So your ranks don't get stripped, but officer enlisted go through the same. It's the only program in the United States military where officer enlisted go through the same training pipeline.
Okay.
So like, um, but you still have a class leading petty officer, so who are like a class enlisted leader. Then you have the class officer, and they work together, just like they would if it was a colonel and a master sergeant of a command. And then you run the class, and the classes typically start out with like 250 to 300 people, um, and they run, I don't know, 5 or 6 classes a year, something like that, maybe a
Mm.
little bit more, a little less.
And what's the first part of Bud's? What do you do to, I guess, get rid of the people that won't make it?
So they do an in-doc phase, which is, they change it up all the time. In-doc could be anywhere from like 2 to 4 weeks. When for this Bud's class, they actually skipped a class. So we were in like, we didn't officially go to in-doc, because once you go to in-doc, that means your class started. We were in this thing called PTRR, physical training rehabilitation recovery, I think it stands for. And it's typically, PTRR was like when people got injured, they would go to PTRR, and you just like train all the time. But it turned into like this, we had to wait like months before um, officially, for some reason, I forget, they like skipped a class that year. And so we were in like this in-doc PTRR phase for like 4 or 5 months. And literally all we did was get beat every fucking day for 4 months. And it was like, it was awful. Then we finally classed up, and it was like, yeah, we're classing up. We're going into first phase. So typically that's not normal of the whole PTRR thing. I think that was like a one-off. Usually you're in PTR for like 2, 3 weeks. You wait to class up. You go and class up, and you go to in-doc. Once you're in in-doc is like a precursor to first phase. It's, you'll touch on log PT, you'll touch on running around with boats. They're like you go and do some pool stuff, just so you go do some obstacle course stuff. You do some workouts on the ground, so you get familiar with like how they want things structured for once you really do class up. And then, so like on a dial of like 1 to 10, 10 being like this is the worst thing ever, you're floating around like a 6, 7 during in-doc. And then once you start first phase, like it's cranked up to like a 12.
Okay, okay. And in those first two phases, the 5 months in the PTRR and starting that initial part before you go to phase one, is your mind still strong? Are you still thinking this
Yeah,
is
I was
exactly what I
I was
want?
good to go. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was having fun. I was like,
yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong. There were some like runs or something like that like, or some beatings that you're just like, man, this sucks. But like, you
yeah,
know it was always going to end. You're like, whatever, we'll
yeah.
be at lunch soon. Yeah, you're like, this will be over soon. Not a big deal.
That's cool. Not phased.
Yeah,
Talking of being phased, phase one. Um,
yeah,
what's that feeling like? Because I'm guessing you've technically gone through two parts. You know, you,
yeah,
you've
yeah, yeah.
you stuck out five
Well, I went
months.
through Bloods twice, so it was
Oh, did you?
yeah, yeah. So I'll get to that. I actually quit in Hell Week my first time. So this class I was with, I quit in Hell Week on Monday night, roughly like 24, a little more than 24 hours in the Hell Week. But my wife got really sick when we were there, so her appendix burst, and then
Oh,
she was in a hospital for like, it was like 3, 4 weeks. Like she was septic. They had her like, they put her in like an induced. It was bad.
okay.
But she was like breastfeeding our daughter, and so now I had to start feeding my daughter through a bottle. And like,
Mm.
what I should have done looking back on it was like stepped away, like took an administrative role from class, but I didn't want to because I was already there for like 5. I was like, dude, I just want to push through. I could do this. Anyway, fucked with my head, and so I quit in Hell Week. And then, but we'll come to that. So first phase, you start first phase. It's 4 weeks. So 4 weeks of just a grind. It's just like total physical grind. Like you're doing 2 mile ocean swims. Every week in Buds, you do a timed obstacle course. You do a 4 mile timed run on the beach, and you do a 2 mile timed ocean swim. That's every week of Buds through the 6 months of Buds.
Wow.
And then as like you move on week to week, the times get harder and harder. Like Buds never gets. People think it like gets easy after Hell Week. I think it gets worse. So the first 4 weeks you're just weeding it. It's a total selection process. They're just weeding people out. So if you start out, I don't remember the numbers on that class, but I want to say we started close to like 300 people. By the time you get to Hell Week, you're probably down to like half that, maybe a little bit more. Like you lost like 60% of your class at this point. And then you start Hell Week and you'll lose. Say you start Hell Week with 100 people, you're probably going to end up Hell Week with like 30 people left at the end of it.
Okay.
40 people.
Okay. Okay. And then you said that Hell Week came along, and that's when you
Yeah, so
made
first
the decision.
phase is each phase is roughly 8 weeks. For first phase might be a little different now. They're always like tweaking things.
Yeah.
You'll do 4 weeks of just like that straight up. It's like 3 or 4 weeks of straight up like physical selection or just like pushing your shit in. Then you do Hell Week. So by the time you get to Hell Week, you're pretty fucking broken down anyway. Then
Yeah.
you do Hell Week, and it's 5.5 days straight nonstop, so fucking zero sleep. Then you come out of Hell Week, you do like a walk week, which is like literally you don't run for like a week, and they're trying to like, because your body's like super, everyone's like really really jacked up. You get a week to recover, and then you basically get right back into it. And then you have 2 more weeks of first phase after that. Might be a little bit different now. Then you go to second phase, which is dive phase. Then you go to dive phase is like 2 weeks, and then you go to land warfare, third phase, and you go out to this island, San Clemente Island, and you do running and gunning,
Okay. All right.
patrolling, all that stuff.
So what happens from quitting in Hell Week to going back again? Obviously, you had to sort your family out.
Yeah,
That's important. But what's that kind of stepping stone for you?
what a humbling experience it was. Um, it built a lot of character in me. So I was really like, whatever. You quit, you ring the bell in front of your class, which fucking sucks. Then and rightfully so, it should be like that. And then you get sent to whatever. You go back to your barracks, you get some sleep. I woke up the next day and I was like, oh my god, what did I do? And I just had a moment, and I was thinking about everything other than what I should have been focused on at the time. I guess, right? Like I had some other shit going on, but it doesn't even matter. And now I was like, I don't want to go to the regular Navy. I was worried. And so I knew some guys that went to EOD training, and EOD training, you could take a test to go to EOD at that same base. And so I went to the Navy EOD office, and I was like, hey, I want to try to go EOD. I just quit Buds. And at the time, they would take people that quit Buds sometimes. Like it wasn't, but it happened. It wasn't uncommon. And they're like, yeah, we'll give you the PT test. Went and took the PT test. I was going through the process. And so I had to go to the administrative office over at the SEAL Training Command and get like some paperwork. And as I was going there, I remember Instructor Delos Reyes. He was our class proctor. He was an evil son of a bitch, but he was fucking great. Like he was a good dude. And he saw me and he was like, Lahiff. And I was like, hey, what's up? And he was like, what the fuck, man? What happened? And I was like, dude, I fucking rang out. And he's like, yeah, I know. He was like, what are you going to do now? And I was like, I'm going to try to go EOD. I was like, I don't want to go to the fleet, and I want to, I came in the Navy to do something more than going on a ship and scraping paint or something. And he was like, what did you come in the Navy to really do? I was like, be a SEAL. He was like, well, fucking be a SEAL. And he was like, go call your detailers, the people that cut you orders. He's like, go call your detailer, go get orders as soon as you can, because that clock needs to start ticking so you could come back to Buds. And typically, if you quit Buds, it takes 3 years before you can apply to come back. And he was
Oh,
like,
shit.
you need that clock to start ticking as soon as, because you could sit at like, after you quit Buds, you could literally sit at that command for like another year before you get orders. He was like, leave as soon as possible. And I literally turned around, went back to the admin office. I was like, call my detailer. I got orders to Japan like a fucking day. He lit a fire under my ass. I was like, I'm going to go suck it up and get back to training. I'm going to fucking come back. And that's exactly what I did. So I got orders to Japan within like 24, 48 hours. My wife at the time, she's out of the hospital. Everything, she's on the up and up. She's getting better. I was like, showed up. I was like, hey, we're moving to Japan. And then moved to Japan.
Wow. So quite, yeah, like you say, a humbling experience, having someone, like you say, light the fire underneath you. But what's it like going to Japan? I mean, that's something that not everyone's going to experience as a duty station.
Yeah, Japan's really cool. So just Japan in general is such a cool country, and there's so much history and culture there. It was like, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have because my mind was just like, get back to SEAL training, get back to SEAL training. So I showed up to Japan Aviation unit. I showed up my command, and when you show up to a command in the Navy, you'll meet with like whoever the command master chief is, like command master sergeant, and you'll meet with the commanding officer at some point during your check-in process. And they're always like, what do you want to do with your life, sailor? And as soon as I check in, they're like, what do you want to do with your life, sailor? And I was like, I'm going to go be a SEAL. And they were like, wait, didn't you just come from SEAL training? I was like, yeah. Sorry, didn't you quit? And I was like, yeah. I was like, but I'm going to go back. And they were like, we need you to be the leading petty officer of our PR shop. So the PR, like the Air Crew Survival Equipment shop. That means I was going to be like the head enlisted person of that little unit. And there was, I don't know, there was like 5 or 6 other sailors in that unit at any time. So I was like in charge of those 5 or 6 sailors. So like being a leading petty officer in the fleet, it was cool, especially because I didn't have that much experience doing that at the time. And so they're like, if you do that and you crush it, we will help you. We'll do everything in our power to get you back to butts. And I was like, fair, shake your hand on it. I'll go crush it. And so so at the time I started picking up college classes again because I only needed like 10 or 12 credits to graduate at this point, like only like 4 or 5 classes. So I started doing college classes again to wrap up my undergrad because I promised my mom when I dropped out of the college that I would get my degree done eventually. And it's going to tie in here in a little bit. So that's an important key. So when you go to Japan, it's called Forward Deployed Naval Forces. And they were, especially in my job, they were, I forget what the exact term for it is, but basically if you get put there, it's a hot fill billet, meaning like it's really hard to get out of that command early. And that's going to come
Okay.
into play in a little bit.
Okay.
So, but going to SEAL training was also a hot thing because of everything that was going on with Iraq and Afghanistan, et cetera. Like they needed more people getting into the SEAL pipeline. So those two competing forces will come together here in a little bit. So I'm in Japan. We would deploy on the Kitty Hawk, USS Kitty Hawk aircraft carrier. It's decommissioned now. It decommissioned like right after I left. But we would go out on that, and you're constantly like going out to sea and coming back, going out to sea. I think the most I spent at sea was probably like 4 months. And being on a ship and trying to stay on shapes, it could be pretty difficult, but like I made it happen. And so I crushed when I was there. Like I was a leading petty officer, I got great evals. I held my word to my command master chief and my commanding officer. And I wanted to go back to BUDS. Well, you couldn't take the SEAL test in Japan. There was nowhere where I could take it at the time. So I actually took leave from the command, flew back home, and drove to a base to go take the test. I passed the test. I put my package in, and the package I got approved early. So remember, I told you usually have to wait 3 years.
Yeah.
I did this at like my year mark in Japan. It got approved because I like the instructors. Going back to some of those instructors that lit a fire under my ass, they put in a good word for me. They helped me out a little bit. Only a little bit, but it helps. They're like, hey, no, this guy should come back. And so they're letting me come back early because I had good evals. My commanding officer and my command master chief said, hey, we're okay with him leaving our command early to go to SEAL training. Like, he's good, he deserves it. But the guy who is in charge of all the PRs in the Navy and saying where they go and what commands, he was like, no, because I don't have anyone to backfill him in Japan, and it's a hot fill billet. He was like, you have to stay there for another 1.5 years, 2 years. And I was devastated. I was like, what the fuck do I do? So I just finished my undergrad. And so now I got my bachelor's degree. I'm enlisted. And I was like, I'm not staying in Japan for another 2 years going out on this aircraft carrier. I was like, no way. I was like, I want it. So at the time, the Army, there was this thing called blue to green. And if you're in the Navy, you can apply to lateral transfer to the Army into like infantry. So I was like, as an officer, and you could submit as enlisted to go officer as long as you had a degree. And
Right.
so I applied to that program and I got accepted. So I could lateral transfer, go to officer school, and then go into the infantry as an infantry officer in the Army, and then eventually go to Ranger school or something along those lines. And that's where my head started getting to. And it trumps the guy that was holding me up and making me stay in Japan. It that off Since it's an officer package lateral transfer, it trumps his thing. So I had one over on him. And so I went to my commanding officer and my master chief, and I was like, listen, you guys could lose me to the Army, and I'm going to go do this, or you guys could help me put pressure on this guy just to release me and send me to Buds. And eventually it worked. That the guy was so pissed. I remember him like cursing. He was cursing me up and down over a phone and in emails, and I was like, "Hey man, you're either losing me to the Army or I'm going back to SEAL training." And so I got my orders back to SEAL
Wow. That's some smart shit, that is, like, working out
training.
these, like, pieces and yeah, that's some awesome thinking. I mean, is it like, did you find out through strategy, research, or did someone come up to you and go, "Do you know about this?" Like, was it all
No,
you or
I
did
just
someone
researched, like I was just researching it, and then I
Mm.
came across it. I remember that there was like an email or something put out like, "Hey, the Army's looking for qualified sailors to become infantry," and I was like, "Fuck, I'll do that."
Fair. So you head back to the US, heading back to Buds for the second time. Is
Yeah,
mindset still strong? Is mindset kind of focused even more this time? Like, where was your head at?
it was so my head was in the right spot. Now my wife's pregnant with my second child, so I
So
was like, just don't get sick this time, just stay
okay,
healthy for me.
okay. Every time
So
you go to Buds, she gets pregnant. Is that was
yeah, the way it worked out with having kids was like it was every time I came back from a deployment or like a long cycle, we ended up. So my kids are all like 3 years apart.
right?
But the so I went back to Buds second time. I was excited, very excited. I was like, I'm either gonna die here or they got to pull me out of training. Like that's like not even crossing my mind. And so I showed up to Buds. Some of the same instructors are still there. And so you go and check in and they see you and they're like, "Oh, Lahiff, you're back." And I didn't even check into my barracks yet. I was doing my dress uniform and they had me doing burpees and push-ups and going wet and sandy, changing my uniforms and making me go get wet and sandy for like a couple hours before I even got to go to my barracks room. Actually, before all that, we had to go. I had to go to Chicago first. So they started this thing called pre-buds, and pre-buds. So as soon as guys who are in boot camp finish boot camp, they go to this thing called pre-buds where they literally have like these crazy coaches and trainers that just you literally train for like roughly 2 months around the clock, and it's not like beating you down. They're really trying to build you up and get you nice and strong uh, to go before you go to buds. Because what they saw was happening was guys would come in to the Navy and the boot camp like really in shape and ready for buds, but then in boot camp they would get like sick and get out of shape, and then they're going so they wanted to try to help boost the number of people getting. Actually, I don't think it fucking helped at all, but because it turns out to be a mental game at the end of the day. It's not really physical. I mean, it's physical, but so I had to go to pre-buds. So I went to Chicago, did pre-buds, and that's where I met like a bunch of my classmates. And then we all flew together to San Diego. And then
Ah,
I found out when I got to San Diego, they're like, "Hey, you're going to be the class enlisted leader." I was like, "Fuck," which is like you get extra special attention, especially the enlisted leader. So it was a trip. It was a hell of a time.
yeah. Um, what's it like when you got to the phase where you rang the bell like the previous time? What
Yeah.
was that like getting through that?
It's funny actually going to before I even we started Hell Week. Like there's certain evolutions, we call them evolutions, like little training cycles. Going to before Hell Week, and some of them are pretty brutal. And like I knew what was coming before it even came. Like the guys that haven't been there before, I was like, just the fucking pain train's coming, dude. Just wait.
Ooh.
I was like, this is gonna be pretty bad. There's like gonna come a point where you're like, please God, just strike me dead right now. Like just make me pass out to end this. And you don't pass out. You end up keep going. You find it in your willpower. You tap that like extra 10% you got in there, which is great because I mean I think that's what helps. I I feel people are SEALs before they become SEALs, and that's why it's so hard for people, or it's so hard for SEAL training to like predict who's going to make it and who's not. They've tried so many different things because you have a guy that looked like he never touched a weight or played a sport in his life, and he ends up making it, and he becomes a really good SEAL. And you have these guys that show up that were like literally Olympic athletes, play professional sports, and they quit like 3 days into it. It's fucking bizarre. And it's a total mental game. But it's still before we started some of these evolutions, looking at these guys, and I would just be like, this one's gonna suck, gents. Just letting you know. Whatever. We got through it, and then we started Hell Week. Obviously you're nervous before you start something like that. You're also excited, and you hang out in like a room. It's a classroom, and you're sitting there chilling all day because you don't know when like Hell Week is going to officially start. You just know it's gonna, and they call it breakout, and like they come in. There's like they're throwing smoke grenades. They're throwing flashbangs. There's all this noise. They're shooting blanks all over the place. There's smoke everywhere. Whistles. They're spraying you with hoses, and it's just pure chaos when they start Hell Week. It's actually really cool. You're like, oh man, this is the fucking shit. Like when you're doing it, and they're just like really pushing your shit in for like those first couple hours to get you like teed up. They really ratchet it up, and as soon as it started, I was like, I'm in the right spot, man. I'm good. Never thought about it ever again. Like the rest of
No.
the week, I was like, dude, I'm solid. And then like I passed that point in time. I remember we were sitting at a meal, and I was like, oh, I'm past the point from last time. And like basically, if you get to like Tuesday lunchtime or something like that, Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon, one of those people say like no one quits after that. Like the only way you get out of the class is if you get hurt, or they pull you for some whatever reason. And nothing. And then you get on autopilot. You get to like Wednesday, Thursday, you're like hallucinating, you're seeing shit.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like a zombie walking around.
So you complete that. You enjoy the dive part, the dive week. You enjoy that part?
No,
No.
no, I didn't like it. Because we just got beat a lot. It was like when you first start learning diving and stuff. Actually, when I lived in Japan, I got certified scuba for fun. I was in
Nice.
Guam for a training trip and I had enough spare time to go get scuba certified. Um, Scuba is a lot of fun when you're like swimming around reefs and stuff. But when you're doing like combat diving, especially like in buds, it's pretty terrible. You're
Yeah.
just cold and wet and miserable all the time. Diving in a pitch dark, you like can't even see your hand in front of your face. Shit's bumping into you under the ocean. You're like, oh, what the fuck was
Yeah.
that? So at first it's cool, but the cool factor wears off very very quickly, and you're just like, man, I want to get to like shooting guns. That's like, I want to get patrolling. Like I want to go jump out of planes. And
Yeah.
they find a way to make all that shit suck and buds. Like
Yeah, I
they
bet, I
make
bet.
the cool factor leaves very very quickly.
See, that's one of the differences between us. I mean, obviously you're a SEAL and I'm not, but I was wanting to be an army diver. So I got through the first course and it was brilliant. And I was shit on land. So when it came to running, everybody would run past me. But as soon as we got in the water, because I was a scuba qualified instructor and I knew I loved it, I was wicked on the water. And then when we were getting underwater to do like, how long can you breathe on one cylinder? And I just like smack everybody out of the water. And then we would do like work underwater, like, I don't know, chiseling away at something, which is pointless. Never going to chisel away through it, but you can't see shit when you smack your hand and
Yeah.
crabs are after you. And I fucking loved it. I thought it was brilliant. But yeah, but I'm guessing
I,
you're
I later on in training, like when you're not getting like so buds is like an advanced boot camp, right? Like it's just like they just ratchet it up. Like you're not learning like these crazy SEAL skills, but it's the basics. But
Basics,
they
yeah.
just learn. The instructors are there to fucking fuck with you,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like you know, and it's God, it just makes it just sucks the fun right out of it. And
yeah.
don't get me wrong, I had good times doing it. There was a lot of funny, like looking back on, I have ton of great memories of training. Like I've never traded them for the world, but it was,
That's cool. And then the final week, or the final part, should I say, did you say that's like the special weapons part? Is that right?
yeah. So you do, it's broken up into a couple parts. It's roughly 2 months. Third phase might be a little, it's like 8 to 10 weeks. One of the first ones, you go to this like mountain region and you do land nav, and you're just like, you're on your own, decent amount, which is kind of rare. Um, you got a big ruck on, and you're just humping, looking for waypoints with like a map, compass. You're just learning how to navigate and like
Yeah.
move around on Earth.
Orienteering, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's pretty basic, but that was cool. You're like camping out. It was fun. It wasn't bad. I mean, you get beat a little bit, but it's pretty. It was for that point in my class and training. I think that was like one of the most chill parts. When we got, and you do some other stuff back at your like the regular SEAL base, and then eventually you go to this thing called San Clemente Island, and I think we were there for like 4 weeks, and that was awful. It was for me. It's different for every class. So some
Mhm.
classes will have a good third phase. It's pretty not too bad. Our third phase was fucking awful. It was like I would do Hell Week over again before repeating my third phase experience, because it was like Hell Week for like 3-4 weeks for us. We had some fucking instructors that were just vicious. Um, but that's where when you go there, you stay at San Clemente Island, super remote island, middle of nowhere. You do you start doing pistol shooting. You start learning how to manipulate the M4, doing some more. You're starting to mess around with explosives and everything. And you're starting to learn like just like basic infantry skills of like shoot, move, and communicate.